Sanjay, I understand that you had a question.
Hari Om. Yes, Guru, I did have a question. I'll still ask it, but I've been thinking about it over the last couple of weeks, and it feels like it's becoming clearer. But the question was, I keep hearing about body, mind, intellect, and how, as a seeker, we have to go beyond these three. And the question was, it felt quite simple at first, but I understand the body and why we must go beyond the body. The body is temporal. It can. I understand the mind as well. The mind being unsteady. The mind being, I think, like a monkey. It just takes us from one place to another. But the intellect, it always felt like on the one hand, the lesson was to fortify the intellect, build it up, make it stronger, stronger, stronger. But then on the other hand, it was, we have to go beyond the intellect. So as I've been thinking about it, I just want some clarification. But where it feels like I've landed is the body and mind. It feels like we have to let go as soon as possible. The intellect is the last thing to go. So we need it to that point to make sure that we govern our body and mind. But ultimately, we won't know the ultimate without going beyond the intellect. But I just want to make sure I haven't deviated from correctness before it's too late.
2 weeks, I don't think is too late, no? We can afford to give it another week or two.
Absolutely. Actually, it's been quite fun just pondering over it every day.
I don't know how consistent and how persistent you have been, but this is how the knowledge was imparted. It was given, the freedom was given to the student to explore, to reflect, and come to an understanding. And exactly as you're doing, come up to the Guru and say, is this my understanding? So the more the time a student is left to himself without any help, that is the real time a student evolves, because he is slogging it out. You're not being spoon-fed. So I really appreciate that you have been pondering. You have invoked the true methodology which the great Vedic gurus have always intended to. So I'm glad the 2 weeks of absence of the satsang help you introspect. Now the question, when the question came my way, I thought it was a brilliant observation. Credit to you for the thought. The question you're asking is, we are told to go beyond the body, mind, and intellect. From what you have said, you're quite clear that we have to go beyond the body and the mind. But then why the intellect? Considering it's the intellect that salvages us. It's the intellect that helps us. It's the intellect that is constantly emphasized throughout the study of the scriptures. So much so we say intellect is a product of wisdom. Oh, sorry, the product of wisdom is your intellect, rather. So when we say that, why are we to transcend the intellect as well? And in fact, the points you have mentioned does echo with what I felt as well. So commend you for your thought process. But just to assure you that your understanding is right, and just to expand on it, firstly, I assure you, in fact, what your understanding is perfect, that intellect is the last straw, the last thing that goes before one attains the merger is the intellect. This is symbolized by when you enter a temple. When a Hindu enters a temple, he takes off his footwear. The footwear, the pair, symbolizes the mind and intellect. The feet take you from experience to experience physically. It is the mind and intellect that drives you from experience to experience philosophically. So when you enter a temple, it is symbolized. There's somebody at the door. Just a minute. I don't know whether I'm needed. The electricity man has come to take the meter reading. So let me see if he calls me. Just a minute, please. The proof that I was not lying, Jama, for her to pay the bill also. So, Sanjay, are you there? Right. So, a Hindu, when he visits the temple, he leaves his footwear outside the temple premises. So entering of the temple and having the darshan of the Lord symbolizes attainment of self-realization. And you have to leave your footwear, symbolizing the mind and intellect is left behind when you enter the temple. And also, similarly, when a Christian, when he goes into the church, you realize that they don't leave their footwear behind. They go along with the footwear into the church. But what they do is, when they start their prayer, they take off their hat. And the hat symbolizes the intellect. So last thing that goes, the last straw between individuality and enlightenment is the intellect. So you will have to hold on to the intellect until you reach that last stage of your spiritual journey. Now, there's the mention in the chapter 2, verses 52 and 53. In fact, 53 exactly talks of the point where the intellect gets perplexed by what has transpired and it becomes extinct and you attain yoga. That's the only place in the Shastras where the drama of realization is explained. What happens at the point of realization and how it happens, 52 and 53 explains it.
Sorry, Guru, that was which chapter?
Chapter 2. Chapter 2, verses 52 and 53. Okay. So I'll not get into that because then it might just take us off the course. So from the bold statement these masters have often said to us, that you are not the body, You're not the mind. You're not your intellect. You are your essential self. You are the pure self within. So you're not this. That's what in the morning prayers also we say, Tad Brahma Nishkalamaham Nachabhuta Sangaha. I am not the mere assemblage of these elements which form the gross, subtle castle, the body, mind, and intellect. I am myself. So the matter of fact is that self you are and you're not the BMI. That how much ever we may not understand it, but yet that is a matter of fact. If you disagree with that for any reason, and if you hold on to the very intellect, believing that intellect which has helped me deal with the temptations at the physical level and all the challenges at the mental level, I think this is an asset, and intellect is an asset, and I got to hold on to it. And if you hold on to it, the very intellect becomes an impediment for your realization. So you got to use it diligently, develop it, bring it to its optimum, respecting your constitution in mind. Bring it to the best what you can to develop your intellect. The last thing you got to do is you got to let go. Just like, as you said, you make good use of your home, your wealth, your property, your belongings, your family, your social circle. Make good use of all that you have liked and amassed and dearly possessed. But one day you will have to leave all of that behind and go, isn't it? I cannot take it along with me. So in this spiritual journey, you have to make good use of your body, mind, and intellect. But at the same time, you got to leave that behind to get that spiritual experience. I'm just drawing a parallel. So it serves a purpose, but you can't take it along with you. Like you use your vehicle to come up to your porch, but you can't carry your vehicle with you into your lobby and your living room and your bedroom. How beautiful you can have a Rolls Royce, but you can't take a Rolls Royce into your bedroom and say, oh, it's such an expensive car. It's so beautiful. But you'll have to leave it at the doorway and go beyond it, isn't it? It can take you to the threshold, but not beyond that. So the intellect takes you to the furthermost of thresholds of your spiritual journey. Body can take you to a point, mind can take you to a point, intellect can take you to the furthermost point in your spiritual journey. But at some stage, that also has to go. Because spiritual experience is not intellectualization. Spiritual becoming or that spiritual bliss is different to the intellectual ecstasy you may experience or the intellectual excitement that you have when you dabble with ideas and thoughts. So God is not an object of conception. You can't conceive God in an idea. You can't capture God in a prayer. You can chant a hymn or a prayer, but you can't capture God in those emotions. It elevates you, but you can't capture God in that. God is beyond that hymn or prayer, how profound it is. So make good use of it. It's an asset. But the same thing which is asset becomes a liability if you don't cross it. And when does it become a liability? When you hold on to it. So intellect comes to, it deals with all the, so what is the main purpose of an intellect? One of the main purpose of the intellect. Why does the intellect exist? And vis-a-vis, when does it cease to exist? That's why I'm sort of giving reference to the 53rd verse of chapter 2. What is the existence? What is the purpose of the intellect? Sanjay?
Just as far as I know, the purpose of the intellect is to guide the mind towards consciousness, towards the higher.
One of the roles it plays. In fact, the intellect exists only when there is a pair of opposite. Because one of the fundamental jobs of the intellect is to constantly discriminate. It needs a pair to exist. It constantly makes a choice. The mind doesn't make a choice. The mind is very clear. It's the intellect that is presented with a dilemma. Am I to do this? Am I to do that? To be or not to be? That's the question. Am I to? Am I not to? So that dilemma, that multitudes of choices is that which keeps the intellect alive. Now, if you take that argument, when the intellect ceases to exist, the intellect is alive because of the pairs of opposites. Now, the question is, when would the intellect cease to exist?
When when we go beyond the pairs of opposites.
See the 52nd verse, it says, Yada te moha kalilam buddhir vititarishati tada gantas nirvedam shrotravyasya shutasya cha. What it says is, when the intellect will cross the mire of delusion, then you grow indifferent to what has been heard and what is yet to be heard. When the intellect will, it's not an easy subject to fathom. You would have gauged by now, every word is pregnant here. It's heavy with a deeper meaning. We just can't rush through it, brush through it. When the intellect will cross the mire of delusion, then you grow indifferent to what has been heard and what is yet to be heard. Shruti vipratipannate yada sthasyate nischala samadha vachala buddhi tata yogama vapsyasi. It says, when the intellect is perplexed by what has been heard, shall stand immovable and steady in meditation, then you attain yoga, which is self-realization. 53 is a continuation of 52. When the intellect is perplexed by what has been heard, shall stand immovable and steady in meditation, then you attain yoga. What has been heard? So when does the entire pairs of opposites converge into nothingness, a step before nothingness? where it merges is at the point of meditation. The last pair the intellect is dealing with is between matra and amatra. The last pair the intellect is dealing. This is, I'm talking when you are at the verge of realization, Sanjay. Is dramatizing what happens at the point before realization. So the intellect is still there. As I've said, it's the last straw that goes, the last thing that goes is the intellect. So till that last moment, you're holding on to the intellect. So what is the intellect dealing with in meditation? You have got rid of all other desires. There is no other desire. The only desire you have is realization. And what you're doing, your mind is chanting the mantra, Om, Om, Om. So the intellect is observing the mind, and the mind is chanting the mantra Om. Om is matra. Matra means sound. Amatra is no sound, silence. So the last pair the intellect is dealing with is sound, silence, sound, silence, sound, silence, sound, silence. Then comes a point, there's no further sound. And when the sound is silent, the mind is extinct. And when the mind is extinct, the intellect is perplexed because it has been busy all through, because it had all the while a pair to deal with, and suddenly it is perplexed with that profound silence. That's what he says. When the intellect perplexed by what has been heard, what was heard was sound, there's nothing more to be heard. Since there's nothing more to be heard, the intellect stands perplexed. It is immovable and steady. And at that point, you attain yoga, you attain realization. And when the mind becomes extinct, then the intellect follows. The intellect becomes extinct. And that is when you actually gain that spiritual experience. So it is the last straw. You hold on to the intellect till that point, and then you will realize that the true spiritual experience is beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond the intellect. Nowhere else it's captured except the 53rd verse of chapter 2. And if I don't fall back on that, we would not know what happens. How would we know? There's nowhere. You can, maybe there's somewhere, I do not. But to what the limited knowledge I have and the readings, there's nowhere else in the Shastras. It's spelled out exactly what happens to the intellect. The intellect gets perplexed. And at that point, you have attained self-realization, and then you are still alive. Ushama, you're not dead yet. Oh, why are you killing that fellow? That fellow is still alive. Avala kashta, but he has struggled so many janmas to attain that moksha, and the moment he attained, you kill that fellow. Pao, Enna Ushama? We can't hear you, ma.
Please ignore my ignorance, Guruji, please.
No. It all adds up to the variety of experience we have. So nothing is discounted. No. So it is not the physical. In fact, if you recall in yesterday's class in the Isavasya Upanishad, I brought about the two concepts of Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti. You recall these two phrases? We reminded ourselves the seventh mantra of the Upanishad says you can attain realization when you're still alive. The seventh mantra talks of it, isn't it?
Yes.
Because he attains realization.
Yes.
So it is not the physical death, which is called the samadhi. The physical death is samadhi. But even before you attain physical death, there could be a lifespan. A man can live a life of realization.
Yeah.
But obviously, you would not know whether that person is realized or not. And as we often said, and one who has reached that state will not claim it.
Yeah.
And as a thumb rule, anybody who claims it, he's a farce. He's a fake fellow. As a thumb rule, if anybody claims that he's realized, 100% guarantee that fellow is a fake fellow. That's a guarantee. You should not consider him as your guru. No guru would ever say that. So therefore, there is none to dispute it. It's only for you to experience it. Okay, Oshama. So Sanjay, thanks for the question.
Thank you for the answer. It's yeah, it's a beautiful. Sorry, if I could just add one more thing, then it feels the intellect, whereas the mind and body is one that we should actively be seeking to overcome. The intellect we have to treat a little bit more carefully because we shouldn't be on a quest to overcome the intellect. It feels like if we do that, we might make a mistake of kind of peaking, not even peaking. We think we're at our highest point, but we're not. It can lead to some kind of, it feels like when the intellect is ready to go, it will just make itself known that it's ready to go. It's not something that we have to endeavor for. Whereas with the body and mind, it feels like it's an active endeavor that we have to overcome body and mind. But intellect, it feels like when that eggshell is ready to break, something life will come out of it. We shouldn't break it from the outside. We shouldn't purposefully try to crack it. We use it for as long as it's there, knowing that, I don't know, will we know that it's time to overcome it, or will it just present itself?
See, as I've said, the intellect is dealing with the mind. Okay. Go back to the statement I made. It's a quintessential statement in the answer. The existence of the intellect is defined by the opposites, which is your own desires, which is what your mind is constantly entertaining. What makes the intellect existent is the mind, and obviously the world also, which is the pairs of opposites. Once the mind becomes extinct, there's no job for the intellect. So it's a catch-22 here. What do you do with the intellect? You've got to deal with the mind. And the moment the mind is dealt with, the intellect has no more job. Thank you very much. You see that?
Yes, that reminder helped. Yes. Okay.
And once you are there, you would know. And once you know, don't go and seek any assurance from anybody. Yah pashyati sapashyati. He who perceives it, perceives it. If you see it, you see it. If you don't see it, you don't see it. So it's entirely subjective, purely subjective. And as you also said, you don't have to do anything. In fact, I would say you will have to be far more careful with the intellect than the mind, contrary to what you say. Because The intellect is a far, what is it that keeps the intellect in check? There are two things that keeps your intellect in check. In fact, not one, two. Huh? You have to be very careful with the intellect. Intellect also can go wrong. As in the 18th chapter of the Gita, we are told there are three types of intellects: sattvic intellect, rajasic intellect, tamasic intellect. In fact, the sattvic intellect is the only intellect which will help you grow. Rajasic and tamasic will destroy you. But in order to ensure that your intellect is blossoming well, there are two elements which keep your intellect in check. What are the two factors that keep the intellect in check? Annapurnama is seriously thinking. I got to ask her before she she almost chews off her pen,
Hari Om, Guruji.
Hari Om.
The two things that keep the intellect in check, I think could be desires and power of discrimination.
We are talking about the intellect also needs to be developed, because I was reacting to the statement Sanjay made that you have to be very careful with the mind and the body, but you don't have to be that concerned, because when intellect matures, it evolves, it pops out. You don't have to do anything to break the egg from outside. He took an analogy of a breaking of an egg. The egg will only hatch only when it breaks from inside, not outside. If you put an external force on an egg, it will never hatch. It will only die.
Gaining more knowledge.
So in that analogy, I said intellect has to be dealt with far greater care. Only when an intellect is dealt with care, it can deal with the mind and the body. In fact, the 27th verse, which we'll get into, is actually going to highlight that. So then I said there are two factors which keep the intellectual development in check. What are they? So it's not the mind, certainly.
Gaining more knowledge, will it help the intellect to gain control, Guruji? One thing could be.
One is absolutely right. What helps you to keep your intellect? What helps you to mold the intellect is the knowledge and wisdom, not mere knowledge. Again, if you just take mere knowledge and don't reflect, Brahma Muhurtam, 4 to 6, you do everything. If you do everything else except intellectual exercise, you'll only get knowledge, you'll not get wisdom. You may be standing on Shirsasana from 4 to 6. Only your blood will rush to the head. Nothing will happen to the brain, to the intellect. Only the brain will become maybe overloaded. You can't be standing in Shirsasana because it's a good yoga exercise. You can't be saying only exercise that you've got to do between early hours is intellectual reflection. And it is that 2 hours exercise that converts information into jnanam to vijnanam. The process of converting knowledge into wisdom only happens those 2 hours. And if you don't do that, you will remain with knowledge but no intellect. So, right. So one thing which keeps the intellectual development in check is knowledge and the wisdom. The wisdom, yes. Being very particular, the wisdom. And the wisdom you gain is through the 4 to 6. Therefore, I connected there. That's one. Okay, ma.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Guruji.
Yes, ma. And the other element which helps, which checks the intellect. Jama.
Conscience, Guruji.
Yes, it is the conscience. The conscience. Perfect. Very good, Jama. It is the conscience. I think Rajima also put conscience and free will. It's not the free will, Rajima, it's the conscience, which is, as we know, it's an aspect of subtle intellect. And it is that which oversees, it is that which constantly checks whether your intellect is behaving correctly. So intellect is not everything, Sanjay. There's something above the intellect. And that's the reason we are seeking this wisdom. So the wisdom and the conscience helps you to mold the intellect to reach that pinnacle which is captured in 53. Then you become witness to the last pair, matra, amatra, sound, silence, and then silence remains. And in that silence, one actually attains that state of realization. Therefore, everybody attempts to sit in silence. It is not sitting in silence that's important. It is the mind must be silent. Many a time, mind becomes violent after meditation. After meditation, the mind is become frustrated in most cases, because that fellow, he's been not been able to do his normal activity for half an hour, 45 minutes. So he comes out more frustrated in most cases. That's an ill-prepared mind. So that's dangerous. So, Sanjay, after any question, you wait for 2 weeks and then ask me, okay? That's the thumb rule.
It's a great thumb rule. It's a great thumb rule.
And that can be extended to everybody also, not just to Sanjay. Okay? In
Thank
fact, the more you think, the more you reflect and explore and investigate, the less you need a teacher. In fact, in the way the student has phrased the question, the teacher knows how well the student has thought about the question itself. That's why I commended at the very beginning, because a question came to me a while ago, and then you said that you thought over it. And as a teacher, I would instantly know whether you have actually thought over it or is something very fluid. You just is mere inquisitiveness, or is it a genuine inquiry? And this is the difference between a dialogue between an Upanishadic student, an Upanishadic master, and a dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna in the Gita. They are poles apart. So when an Upanishadic student, that's also a dialogue. So an Upanishadic student asks the question, the student has got all the fundamentals with him. He understands the nuances of all these terminologies and what's the context, and then he asks. So there's a punch in the question. It stands. In fact, it almost challenges the guru, because it's so well taught. And yet the teacher has the edge because he has that experience. It's not mere intellectual. He has that experience. So he's able to bring it out. So questions are encouraged. You've got to question. Prashnena. When you question, it brings the best out of the student. You really grow when you question a guru. But before you question, sleep with the question, bathe with the question, walk with the question, wine with the question, dine with it, and then vomit which is not digested. One which is digested, you understood it. Which you have not digested, you vomit in front of the guru. Guru, I don't understand this. Taken care of. This is how a student approaches a guru. All right, Sanjay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Most welcome. All right. I think there are a couple of comments. I will take it up. Before that, Ramji.
Namaste, Guruji. I don't know whether I should wait till next week to ask the question or I can ask now.
No, the question is, when did that question came into your mind? That you got to tell us first. Then we will determine.
The question came up as you were answering Sanjay's question. So my question is like this, Guruji. Since you said the wisdom and conscience are the two things which control the mind, which control the intellect. For intellect to take,
not control the intellect, it helps to keep the intellect in check.
Correct. Yeah, it helps to, and it helps to mold also, as you said, mold the intellect. And so to take the final leap for the intellect to go over that, let's say, as the pole, as you say, the pole vaulter. Okay, you take that. You need that release of intellect from even wisdom and conscience, or it is not necessary. That was one question. And a related question is that
one by one.
Okay.
Can I understand your question, sir? What you're asking is, when the intellect is ready, does it need to be allowed or discharged by the wisdom and the conscience? Is that what you're asking?
Either discharged by them, or the intellect has to free itself from the wisdom and conscience to take that leap, the final leap. Is it the intellect which is taking the leap, or is it the wisdom which is taking the leap?
So in the context of the question, your quotient of wisdom is measured by the quotient of your intellect. So wisdom and intellect are one and the same.
Yeah, so that's what you mentioned even in a few classes earlier.
Yeah.
And but since you said that intellect is molded by wisdom, so I was wondering whether wisdom is at a higher plane than intellect, which is molding intellect.
It is. For example, yes, it is. So if I say how much wisdom you have, it is the acquired wisdom we are talking.
Right.
The acquired wisdom is defined by the clarity of your thought and the capacity to handle and manage your mind, isn't it?
Yeah. But it feeds into each other. I mean, yeah.
It is. So as I have said, the knowledge, when reflected, brings about wisdom, which expresses as a clarity of thought. What is intellect? A clear, precise, logical thought process is intellect.
Correct.
So when you say that intellect and wisdom are one and the same, you can think clearly to the extent you have wisdom. Am I right to say that?
Yeah.
But further wisdom, how do you acquire? From the knowledge, but not mere information, but the knowledge set through the process of reflection, the early hours. So where is the wisdom contained? The wisdom is contained in the knowledge itself. You have to extract it. Once you have extracted it, you have made it your own. And how does it become your own? it expresses through the intellect.
Yeah, it expresses through the choices you make, because intellect helps you to make the choices, right?
Correct.
That's why we
Correct.
call it wise choice or unwise choice. And wise choice and unwise choice are made by intellect, but under the influence of the wisdom, let's say.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So that is addressed. Now, does it need to get itself freed from the conscience? No, conscience is just like, as we understand, conscience is the messenger of God. So remember we said that conscience is that aspect of your personality. It's a messenger of God which guides you to the truth. So it remains an objective witness to everything that's happening. I'm just dramatizing it.
Yeah.
Conscience also is an aspect of your subtle intellect. It's all still an element of that. It's like another hat, another role of the same subtle intellect. So
Yeah.
It's not that the wisdom and the conscience is holding the intellect to be liberated. In fact, I've said what was that quintessential statement I made? I even repeated to Sanjay. What was that?
Intellect exists when you have, I wrote it that when you have options in front of it, when it has to make
Sanjay,
choices. Or
what is the sentence, Sanjay?
Sanjay can't hear.
No, I can hear. I'm just failing in my note collection. Guru, I can't find that statement. You did make it. You made it clearly and you made it many times.
Yeah. What was that statement, Gayatri Ma?
You said that intellect, is available means known because of the mind, and once it it ceases that mind observing that sound and matra and amantra, when it observes that silence, that it gets perplexed, like what is happening to the mind. That is the quintessential.
You're gone beyond that statement which I was
Completely,
seeking. Yeah. What I think
It
I
was
said
one
is
sentence.
intellect,
It was just one
intellect
sentence.
exists. Rajima, have you got it? Anybody who has got it? I think I said intellect
Guruji,
exists.
exists where there are pairs of opposites, so that it is able to
Yeah.
discriminate.
The intellect exists as long as the mind exists. The intellect ceases when the mind ceases to exist. That was a statement I think I made. So when the mind ceases to exist, the intellect ceases. So what is actually keeping the intellect in hostage is the intellect, is the mind, sir, not the wisdom and the conscience, actually the mind.
Yeah, in fact, all three of them, they keep feeding each other. I feel that it is a very iterative process which goes on between the three of them: wisdom, intellect, and mind.
How do you say that?
I think wisdom helps the wisdom helps intellect to evolve, and intellect helps the wisdom to grow through the assimilation of knowledge, collection of information, converting information into knowledge. But at the same time, the same knowledge is used by wisdom to improve the intellect. So I felt that there is some level of.
How is the mind involved, sir, in this?
No, between the mind and intellect, like you just said, that as long as mind is active, and then only intellect has a role. So in that sense, it is like two opposite people. No? So if one is not there, the other one doesn't have a job. So it is like they feed into each other.
But the problem is the mind is so robust and so gigantic, and the intellect is like a Lilliput.
Correct.
The current situation I'm talking.
Hmm.
So the intellect is being bulldozed by the mind. So we need a lot of wisdom to help the intellect handle what the mind is presenting. Isn't it? That's the actual scenario the world is facing today.
Yeah, correct.
All right, sir. Okay.
So,
You said there's another connected question.
Yeah, the
Okay.
connected question was that when you have to take when the intellect has to take the final leap, many times there is a role that is played by faith, right? If you have a faith that when you take the leap, you get what was envisaged, or what you have visualized, or what was told to you by the guru, or what you have read in the scriptures, and that is the yoga, or that is the self-realization state. If you don't have that faith, then you may not take that final leap. Is that so, or does it happen automatically?
So the final leap to realization is the culmination of your spiritual journey. But you need faith to begin your spiritual journey. So there are two opposite things. You need faith. So if you want to plunge into this journey and devote your life towards this attainment, you need to have faith in the knowledge, maybe little faith in the teacher.
A lot of faith.
And then, I don't know, a little faith. Sir. So you need to have faith to plunge into the process, to take that leap, to reach that state where you leap into realization. You need Shraddha, not faith.
Okay.
Shraddha is unflinching effort, uncompromising purpose, unprostituting consistency. I would not let go, as if your life pings on it. That kind of purpose takes you to realization.
Okay.
Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupas.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is what you need to attain that state of enlightenment. But to start the journey, we need faith, not to end the journey. Okay, sir?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Right, sir. Most welcome. Okay, Apparao Garu.
Hari Om, Guruji.
Hari Om, sir.
Guruji, this is my third class, and I'm enjoying each and every word that is being discussed here. But when I go back and try to read Bhagavad Gita, I get confused. So I want to check with you, when I'm reading Bhagavad Gita, do I have to read it, understand it as a third person, that is a discussion between Krishna and Arjuna, or do I have to understand as Arjuna, or do I have to understand as Krishna as a first person? Because whenever I'm reading it in different, from different connotation, the very meaning is changing.
The very structure of these textbooks is to address your subjective growth. So whatever is dramatized in any textbook is an objective representation of a subjective phenomenon. And what I mean by that is, whatever you read in the text there is directly addressing you. So it is not that it's a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. In fact, it's a dialogue with Lord Krishna and Apparao. And that is when you will imbibe the teaching, because it's directly addressing you. And that is what makes these texts Sanatana Dharma, which applied to Arjuna then are very much applicable to you now. What would vary is degree, not kind, because we are all of the same kind of Arjuna's caliber. Differ in degree. We are all in the state of Arjuna, little less deluded, little more wiser. That's about all. But the knowledge is going to help every seeker right until you reach that state of realization. Arjuna perhaps at a very low level, you are perhaps at much higher level, not in the same state of delusion which Arjuna was. You're not in that deluded state. Certainly none of us are in that state of delusion of what Arjuna was. But thanks to Arjuna, we got that wisdom from the Lord. So you should, and I should, all of us should read as if the Lord is addressing me. So when I take this message, it is for my own development, as if it is for my, it's a scan of my inner personality. It tells what's happening exactly within me. And it does happen exactly what's happening within you. No exceptions. All right, sir.
Thank you, Guruji.
Right. And I thought, I don't know, this question, I didn't expect this question coming, but I think you, at 12:06, you asked a question. Guruji, no thought is the same as no sound. Is that clarified? Sorry, I think you have to unmute yourself. Don't rush to mute them, please.
Guruji, when you're discussing about no sound and sound, and somebody, once they are they got rid of their consciousness or intellect. So when there is this calmness, I thought calmness is also thoughtlessness. At the same time, when there is a thought, there is always a conflict, and you have to discriminate between which is a better thought, which is a wrong thought, whatever it is. So thoughtlessness is also something like no sound. That's what I was thinking. I wanted to clarify with you.
Yeah. In the context of the 53rd verse of the 2nd chapter, when we are talking of sound and silence, the only sound is the thought the mind entertains of the mantra Om. You chant Om. That's the thought. And the silence and thought until you reach that state of total silence. That total silence is a state of thoughtlessness. That same state of thoughtlessness in the Gita, elsewhere it is described, I think in the 3rd chapter, it is said, it says that perfection as Naishkarmyam Purushoshtate. They say actionlessness is perfection. In the 3rd chapter it says. Now this has been misunderstood, sir. When the Gita says actionlessness is perfection, Naishkarmyam Purushoshtate, people have misunderstood actionlessness as inaction. Actionlessness is not inaction. Actionlessness is exactly what you said, is a state of thoughtlessness. And thoughtlessness means desirelessness. Desirelessness means vasanalessness. So what they're saying, once you have eradicated all your vasanas and desires, you attain that state of perfection. Not understanding this, they mistake it as inaction. So in the name of becoming spiritual, people today abandon action, abandon growth, abandon dynamism. At least in the course of my life, as long as my limbs are strong, I will continue to act, I'll continue to perform, I'll continue to be dynamic. I should not embrace inaction in the name of becoming philosophical or spiritual. Because inaction is death. If you don't agree to me, ask everybody who has experienced that compulsory quarantine for 2 weeks in their house. You get yourself locked yourself in a room or a place. Your body becomes morose. There is no life. It becomes lifeless. To that extent, you need that physical activity. It needs energy. It needs life. And if you don't believe that, airtight seal a particular room or your premise. What would happen very soon? It becomes poisonous. The very same air you keep breathing in becomes poison. It kills you. So there is no growth by abandoning action. Growth is in attaining actionlessness, which is thoughtlessness. All right, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Most welcome. Jama. Guruji, is free will product of wisdom? No. Free will has got nothing to do with wisdom. Free will is the freedom which gives the intellect to question everything. Free will operates through the intellect, but free will is an independent factor, which is known as Purushartha. Purushartha is the free will. So Purushartha is an independent factor, just like the conscience. When I told Ramji, I said conscience is independent. Similarly, free will is independent. Free will operates through the intellect. Conscience oversees the intellect. So there are two different roles free will and conscience plays, but free will gives you the freedom to do what you want. By the very word free will is you're not bound. You are free to go where you want to go. Are you bound by anybody? Are you bound? Are you chained? Are you locked up in your place? What would you say? No, Guruji, I am free to go wherever I want to go. Isn't it? You have the freedom.
What I mean, Guruji, instead of taking a beaten path, which is what people say destiny, you have the choice to change the course of the beaten path, a better, higher path through the free will. So how does one develop that free will? Isn't not because of the wisdom that one exercises that free will, Guruji?
2 weeks time, ask the same question.
I'm confused.
Ask me the same question after 2 weeks.
Okay.
I would want to leave you in that confusion for a while. Figure it out. Pen your thoughts down. Examine them. I already said free will is an independent factor. It operates through the intellect. It can't be tampered with anything. Now, how is it connected with destiny, with the choices? Think over it. Okay, ma.
Thank you. Thank you, Guru.
Right. Yes, ma'am. Rajima?
Guruji, the two qualities of the intellect are Viveka and Vairagya. Viveka we understand as wisdom, or is taken care of the morning hour and manana that we go through from knowledge to wisdom, vijnana to vijnana. How is this Vairagya taken care of, Guruji? Does this passion, detachment through the intellect, through the free will, or again it's coming back to the same question?
In fact, it's a
So
good
how does the
question. I got your question. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. How does?
Does the conscience influence the decisions taken? No. So
No.
that's
No,
where I get a little confused.
let's not bring the question. The question which you have jotted down, the two qualities of the intellect, which is often said, are Viveka and Vairagya. Now, Viveka is the capacity to discriminate. A capacity to discern between right and wrong, good and bad. Okay. Vairagya is that dispassion, a sense of detachment.
Mm.
And Vairagya measures your wisdom. So the capacity to renounce the lower and pick up the higher is measured by Vairagya, not by Viveka. I repeat, Viveka is the capacity to discriminate between right and wrong. But do you have the capacity to drop the lower and pick up the higher? It's like saying you must not be attached to wealth. Example. It's only gross. You can understand the difference between gross and subtle. You must develop attachment to the higher. You understand the difference between becoming materialistic and sensual vis-a-vis leading a spiritual life. Your intellect discriminates, ma, Rajima? Your intellect has the Vairagya, Viveka to discriminate, right? Viveka. But Vairagya is to drop the lower and pursue the higher. That is Vairagya. One is to discriminate. Other thing is to drop it. So the real dropping of the lower, that detachment or dispassion to that lower, is measured by the quotient of your Vairagya, which is nothing but your wisdom. For example, another example, a person who addicted to smoking, he knows the difference between what it is to smoke and what it is not to smoke. The effects of smoking, the effects of non-smoking, he knows it very well. But he doesn't have the Vairagya to give up the desire for smoking and lead a life of health. I know it. In fact, he can write a book on the effects of smoking. He's so well versed. He's so well experienced. Because he's on the verge of destruction. And there's nobody who's such a chain smoker than him. But yet, he's not able to control the mind. So a guru, a true guru, looks for a student who has Vairagya, not mere Viveka. It's easy to have Viveka, but not easy to develop Vairagya. First, you must be able to discriminate and then give up. So what follows Viveka is Vairagya. But many students just have Viveka and no Vairagya. Because then you don't pursue the higher, isn't it? You're just holding on to your lower. You're still behind the mind. You don't have the intellectual strength or the wisdom to say no to it and seek the higher. So Vairagya is like a flower blossom. A blossomed flower is Vairagya. A spiritual aspirant, when he blossoms spiritually, he is full of Vairagya. He is no more enchanted by the temptations of the world. He is not drawn by the lower. He is all inspired to seek the higher goal, which he clearly understands. The life of leading a worldly life vis-a-vis a spiritual life. He understands that. That is no big deal. To have Viveka is no big deal. What we all must cultivate is Vairagya. In simple terms, Vairagya is to let go. Just let go. You're not holding on to it. In simple terms, that profound concept of Vairagya is to let go. You know, Bhishma Pitamaha. In the Shastras, Bhishma is known as the Bhishma the Terrible. You've heard the stories. You know, he renounced the kingdom, you know, isn't it? He didn't want kingdom because his father fell in love with a fisherwoman and he was sulking. He went up to the father and said, "What's wrong?" He came to know that he is in love with a girl and the girl's father was not allowing to marry the king. Can you imagine? The king wants to marry an ordinary fisherwoman and the father was not obeying. So the father was not in his good mood. So he found out what is happening. He went to the father and asked, "Why are you not allowing? The king wants to marry your daughter. You know what it means for you? You're going to become royal overnight." No, I understand all that, but I don't want my daughter to be second grade because he's already married, you are his son, and you will heir to the throne, and all my daughter's children will be second grade citizens. They will never ever enjoy the throne. So I don't want to give my daughter to your father. To which that's when Bhishma took an oath and told to that fisherman that I will not marry. I have renounced a throne, nor will I marry, so that none of my children will ever be eligible to inherit the throne, just to support the mere whim of his father to marry a fisherwoman. That is Vairagya. You may say, what stupid act Bhishma did. Just to support what his father's lust for a fisherwoman, he renounced the throne and renounced not to get married. It is not that. What needs to be highlighted is the great caliber of Bhishma. So Bhishma is held at a very high pedestal for his capacity to renounce. Now, if I ask you, what can you renounce? It is not physical. It is not measured by physical parting, but you start with physical giving. It is not measured, mark my words, it's not measured by how much you physically part, but it begins with physical parting and then mentally you give up the value for it. If you can't even part with something, somebody wants it. And Sanjay, this is where we end up using the intellect and the knowledge to justify, oh, renunciation is not a physical giving up, it's a mental attitude. Oh, therefore, I am very busy cultivating the mental attitude and getting developing an obsessive attachment to the form. It is not developing an obsessive attachment to a thing that you have. Let go. It is the capacity to drop it. And as the Englishman says, the penny drops. And that's when you realize that's the growth. The real growth is in letting go. And right now we are holding on to everything that we have got our hand on, isn't it? Every little thing that we have got hold of, we are holding on to it as if it's everything is mine, it belongs to me, it's me, I have got it, it belongs, it's like a proprietary thing you're holding on to. Now let go, man. Understanding the futility of what you're holding on to, letting go of it. Don't do it because you have to let go. It will frustrate you. Then you say, oh, why did I let go? It has to, as Sanjay said, it has to come from inside out. Once you understand the futility of it, it's gone. It's no more there in your collectibles. It's gone. It's lost. You have lost the value for it. Why would you hold on to it? But still, renunciation is not measured by a physical possession or dispossession. It is measured by your attitude to them. I repeat, renunciation, detachment, or vairagya is not measured by your possession or dispossession. It is measured by the mental attitude you give to them. However, start practicing by letting go and giving. The only way you can test your capacity of vairagya is to let go and see what your mind does to you. And observe the mind after letting go. If your mind is very calm and cool, that means you are not bound by that object of your possession. You're a master. Chalta hai. It's fine. You have no value for it. It's gone, it's gone. That's where Shakespeare says, he who steals my purse steals trash. What does it mean? It is aptly quoted in the context. His value for money was garbage. He had no value for money. 99% recurring are attached to money. So one of the rarest qualities you find in people is who are detached to money. That's what Shankaracharya says, artham anartham, calamity. To have wealth is a calamity. Because you will develop attachment to it. And where Oliver Goldsmith says, where wealth accumulates, men decay. So wealth becomes the instrument of your spiritual decadence, your growth, you decay. So the real capacity of vairagya is let go. So one must start cultivating this quality of just giving to a point where you start giving recklessly. And then we'll start rationalizing it. First, you become worthy of a giver, man. And then we decide whether the recipient is worthy of receiving. Many a time we say, oh, I don't think that fellow deserves my giving. Before you decide whether the receiver is worthy of receiving, you become worthy of a giver. And in order to become worthy of a giver, you must develop this quality of vairagya to let go. I'm quoting Khalil Gibran. Khalil Gibran, the Persian poet, he says, you have to be worthy of a giver before you find the recipient worthy of receiving. Long, long way to go for us. So, Viveka and Vairagya. Very good question. Are you okay, Ma?
Thank you, Guruji.
Last question, Soumya Ma. Asking what is the exact meaning of Shraddha. Shraddha is not faith much. As we said, Shraddha is nothing but a capacity to pursue any goal until you get to it, until you reach the goal. So that capacity is measured, is also borrowed. Again, the concept of dhriti comes into Shraddha. A little bit, dhriti is consistency. So dhriti is consistency. Shraddha is the capacity to reach the goal. They're two different qualities. Dhriti and Shraddha are two different qualities, but they can be mentioned in one breath, in one go, because they all are, they both are talking of one and the same. Dhriti is consistency. Shraddha is the capacity to pursue it until you reach the end. So the accent on Shraddha is reaching the goal. The accent in Dhriti is to make your actions consistent. So Dhriti is almost the process. Shraddha takes you to the end. Okay, ma?